All right, guys, Andrew Lissy here, and today I want to go over stress management and stress management regarding throwing and training at the same time. But we're going to have to go over a few definitions first, and again, I'm just going to kind of ramble on my thoughts regarding managing stress from a psychological and a physical standpoint, so you guys can stay healthy while you're trying to throw and train at the same time during this crazy world that we live in. And to prepare you for, again, that moment of time when you guys are all out there, on the mound and, getting ready to go, and then how to adapt our training accordingly. So the first two things we're gonna have to think about is the definition of stress and recovery. So stress is a physical, mental, or emotional factor that causes bodily or mental tension, right? So when I think of stress, I think about, from like a psychological perspective, and I've written some stressors here, just, school, family, finances, psychological well-being, job and career, and then obviously the future is something that can create stress, right? And recovery is a return to normal state of health, mind, or strength. So it's basically how you adapt to the stress. So again, life stressors and then baseball stressors, right? And then in the middle is a stress bucket, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But you can all see how, a lot of us have these different stresses right now. I know when I was, getting ready to graduate college, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do next. Thankfully, I'm here right now talking to you, and I kind of, figured it out in the whole process. I was very, very stressed, and that created a harder time for me to recover when I was trying to prepare for baseball, right? So this type of stress on the left side was, again, not allowing me to perform at my best level. My arm was always, bothering me, and I was always high tense, and I wasn't able to relax and have fun. So again, we're going to talk about how to manage all that and move forward so you can, feel great and play at an optimal level. And then on the right-hand side, you have baseball stresses. So bullpens, long toss, physical performance training, hitting and swinging, light toss, and learning a new pitch. And I'm sure there's other stressors that I didn't go over. These are just ones that immediately popped in my head while I was putting this together. So the one thing that I've been realizing and learning a lot is, a lot of athletes don't understand how to manage stress, right? So they think, more is better. And I got one more for you too here. We're going to add this, but weighted baseball is a huge one. Bam. All right, cool. So weighted baseball is a huge stressor. And, so again, one thing that I've learned over the past, few years for doing this and, trying to understand from my perspective too, when I played baseball, what I was doing or what I was missing. And I think a lot of the understanding that I've learned is, I didn't really understand the recovery side of things. I thought, more was better. And if I do this, and it feels good, I might as well do it 500 more times. And, that could be, getting off a mound and throwing, 30 extra pitches when you're not supposed to, or, I like the way the weighted baseball feels tomorrow. Let me just start throwing 5-pound baseball or 5-pound weighted baseballs, or, just overdo it, right? And again, if the goal is to stress our body and then learn to adapt to the stress, we're going to go over it when I turn this over. But the higher the stress, the harder it is for you to come down from that stress, right? So this is where we have our stress bucket, right? So again, everybody perceives stress differently, and I think that's something that's important to understand is, the way that I perceive stress, the way that you perceive stress is different, right? The way that your body reacts to training or your body reacts to during a bullpen is going to be significantly different than my body, right? So I'm trying to give you the information for you to figure it out rather than just say, hey, like, do this. I think it's important to understand your body and how you react to stress, and then from there, almost like manage your own programming, if that makes sense, right? We also have, two awesome pitching coaches who will be able to help you guys if you have any more questions regarding like baseball pitching specific throwing programs. They would be more, apt to help you than I would. I'm just talking about more of like a stress response and, my thought process regarding how to move forward with training and throwing at the same time. So let's talk about the stress bucket, right? So the more this bucket is filled, the more stress we have, right? And if the bucket is filled, with the most amount of stress, that means the bucket's heavier to, to carry around, right? Just your body doesn't react to it as well, right? So And then obviously, again, your body reacts to these stresses differently, right? So something for me, you know, who's not really throwing right now, just even throwing a baseball 60 feet for 30 throws is going to stress my body out way more than, you know, somebody who's been throwing for, you know, upwards of 15 years with, you know, 3 or 4 months rest. Like I haven't thrown consistently for like 4 years, right? So my body's going to react differently to 60 feet, 30 throws than your body is 30 feet or 60 feet, 30 throws. So let's say that, you know, bullpens are significantly high stresses. So let's go over this, right? So high stress bullpens, long toss, probably high stress. Physical performance training obviously is going to be high stress. Hitting and swinging, and depending on how many times you hit and swing, it could be moderate. Let's go mod to high. Light toss is probably going to be low stress. That's recovery. Learning a new pitch is going to be very stressful, and then weighted baseballs are going to be very stressful, especially when you overdo them. So you can see how majority of the things in the baseball realm is high stress, right? It's a neurological and a physical stress to the body. So like learning a new pitch where your brain has to understand like basically like how to put my arm slot in the same position over and over again to get that feel is going to be high stress. Like it's taking a lot of mental thoughts to get there. And then, you know, obviously throwing a bullpen, you know, 40 pitches is going to be a lot of stress on your physical body, right? Obviously it's going to be a lot of stress on your mental thought process too, because you got to put the ball where you want. You have to think about, well, this guy's in this count and, you know, this guy's calling it here and all this other stuff. So you can see how baseball is very, very high stress. And then obviously, again, your body reacts to these all differently, right? So, but let's say that, you know, this is your thought process for like a day, but then it translates over to the following days after that. So let's say that Monday I come in and I'm like, all right, you know, let's go light toss, right? So Monday's light toss, cool. So then we'll come in Tuesday. Tuesday's a little bit more of like a long toss. And then Wednesday's a bullpen. So we're going to call this Wednesday, right? So we're on Wednesday and we're bullpenning, right? And we're like, all right, 40 pitches. I'm going to teach myself a new pitch, all this other stuff. So bullpens, you're probably going to want a long toss before your bullpen, and you're going to teach yourself a new pitch. So these are three very high stresses. So we'll say, you know, this part right here and below is long toss. You got long toss before you throw a bullpen. And then from here is the actual physical stress of bullpens. And then bam, here is the stress from learning a new pitch. We'll call that NP, right? And then you're like, oh man, like I want to get after it. Like I want to get after it in the gym. All right, bam. I just filled my entire stress bucket. We'll call this PPT, physical performance training. So Wednesday alone, with throwing a bullpen, long tossing, learning a new pitch, and then getting my butt kicked in the gym is the most high stress day that you could ever imagine when it comes to throwing and hitting, right? And performance training, right? And if we think about recovery as the ability to return to a normal state of health, mind, or strength, which is adapting to stress, think about what this day does to the next few days upcoming, right? So it's not like I just wake up on Thursday and I'm like, oh, I feel great, right? I'm sore, maybe my head hurts a little bit because I've been thinking a little bit too much, right? So you can see how, you know, having multiple Wednesday days throughout the week, right? So having 3 long toss days throughout the week might not be the most optimal way if you're trying to also get stronger, right? Or you're trying to maintain strength, right? It's about managing, again, your stresses. So, you know, long toss, bullpen, new pitches, and then performance training, if they all go together, you're going to be completely fatigued physically and mentally. And that, again, that's going to impact the next few days moving forward, right? Because we're going to go over we're going to go over to the next side of things is, so recovery is an active process, right? So I can't just take off the next day and assume I'm going to recover better. I mean, it's, you know, it can happen, but it's not going to happen as fast as if I start to, you know, learn different recovery modalities and thought processes behind it, right? So as I talked about before, the more stress you have, the longer it takes for you to recover, right? And on the right-hand side, I talked about some recovery strategies. And I'm going to talk to you also about, on the XY graph, my thought process behind managing both at the same time, right? Because ultimately training and throwing can be fixed at the same time, and then they can also be sporadic. When the season comes, you don't really know if you're a reliever when you're going to be throwing, and how many times a week you're going to be throwing, whereas a starter might have a little bit more of an understanding. So on the right-hand side, so some recovery strategies. Obviously, is managing workload, like I just talked about on the other side of this board. If I have multiple days that are exactly like the Wednesday that I talked about, where it's bullpen, long toss, new pitch, and then getting after, it's going to be harder for me to learn how to, again, recover and then feel good, right? Whereas on the other hand, if I'm not stressing myself enough to where my body has to learn to adapt to it and react to it, I'm not going to be able to overcome the higher stresses of throwing 60, 70, 80 pitches moving forward, right? So foam rolling, self-mile, fast release, positional breathing and meditation, that tends to be my favorite way to recover. I think it's really, really great to kind of learn how to calm your nervous system down, which is, allowing your body to, again, recover from that stress. Long, low-intensity walking, mobility flow series, again, another, thing that I truly enjoy, doing some mobility flows, just to get the blood flowing a little bit. And it's a low stressor, but it's also a good training reaction. Again, you get a little sweating and you're really not doing much besides like a body weight workout. And then sleeping 8 to 9 hours a night, limiting alcohol, and then proper nutrition and hydration. So we can control those last three a little bit more than anything else regarding recovery. But all right, so let's go to this graph now, right? This is, I think, the important factor of this. You're like, I got a lot of information. I understand what you're saying. Now what do I do with it, right? So on the the x-axis is days of the week, so Monday through Sunday, and then the y-axis is intensity 1 through 10, right? So again, your body can only react to your body can only have as much energy as we give it, and the way that our body recovers from these stresses. So we're going to go, red is going to be training and blue is going to be throwing, right? So let's say, so we'll go training. So let's say, Monday is a lower body day and it's a high stress day from training, right? You're deadlifting, you're doing Bulgarian split squats, you're doing a lot of lower body exercises that are high stress. You're doing lateral lunges, all that fun stuff, right? So that's a high stress day. Then from there, Tuesday is going to be upper body high stress day, but we can't stress our body as much as we did the day before because it still needs to learn to recover from it, right? So, bam, we'll go here. We'll go 6 to 7. Bam. And then Wednesdays, it could be a mobility day or a movement day. Probably not as stressful. Bam. Cool. And then this is also where we can learn to adapt how many days a week we train or the days that we get after and we don't, right? And then Thursday, again, high intensity, lower body. So you can see how it's basically the same thing throughout the week, and then bam, right? So this is just, again, a high-load training method, basically learning to manage your stress throughout the week, and then Sunday is off day. But if you want to talk about active recovery, maybe this is a day where you go super low and you go, low training, low intensity walking, mobility flow series, maybe spend 30 minutes of meditating and breathing and foam rolling. So that's something else I've been thinking about too, is what we could do on that Sunday to help us recover for Monday. So then you can see from here, right? If you have a high stress day for training, it probably doesn't make sense to do a high stress day for throwing as well, right? So maybe this will be on the blue side of things. We'll go light day, right? So this is light toss, and then up here we're gonna go a little bit longer toss because we haven't stressed our body out nearly as much. And then Wednesday's a low day, so we could stress ourselves more with some throwing, right? Bam. And then you would just continue that throughout the week, right? So you can see how they play together, right? The goal is to be able to almost like equal the 10 RPE, right? So if this is 8, maybe this should be 2. If this is 6, this should be 4, which is about. And then if this is 5, this should also be 5. Or maybe this should be 4 and that should be 6. But again, you could see how, again, if let's put it this way, right? Let's say that this is a high stress day and then I was like, all right, I want to throw a bullpen, right? And they're both high stresses. Think about how hard it's going to be for me to recover for this next Tuesday when I want to throw and when I want to lift, right? It's going to be significantly harder to recover from unless I do a lot less of one or the other, right? So there's a post that Jordan put up, who is our pitching coach, talking about, you know, how to manage these different stresses from a throwing and lifting perspective, and then putting them together. But all right, so let me go more now into like my thought process of programming around bullpens and such. All right. So right now, again, it's hard to say whether you want to throw one or two bullpens. Let's just go for, you know, one bullpen, just, you know, maintaining right now. But let's say that your bullpen is on a Thursday. So let's go throwing, bullpen, bam, Thursday, high stress. All right, so preparing for this, we need to kind of have like, it would need to be like a ramp up phase, right? So you wouldn't want to go high, 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 high. You wouldn't want to go low, 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 low. You'd want to go maybe, again, like a ramp up. So bam, bam, bam. Or even so, maybe you could go high, a little bit higher, and then a little bit lower. That way you can almost, you know, hit that peak for that bullpen, right? And then from there, you're gonna wanna, again, do this all over again, recover, and then maybe a little bit higher stress, and then bam, a little bit lower stress. And then you can kind of change it throughout the week. But now from a throwing or a training perspective, right, my thought process here is, so the bullpen's for Thursday, so we need to be 100% ready for this bullpen on Thursday. Monday, from like a training thought process, where we normally go lower, upper, movement, lower, upper, movement, and then off day. What I would say is, so go lower here, upper here, again, movement, mobility, flow. I think mobility would probably be a little bit better to kind of make you a little bit looser. And I also think that these days shouldn't be as stressful from like a training perspective, right? So there's a difference between off-season training, preseason training, and in-season training, which we all have to understand. And then from here, you know, maybe you do again like a movement day. So after you're done throwing, then you go to a movement day. And then from here, you can go total body or heavy lower, and then upper body. And then from here, again, you could go kind of like mobility, which will prepare you for that heavy lower on Monday.